Good morning, please be seated. Do you know what a sacred cow is? I'm going to show you a picture of one as soon as I get this thing working. There we go. Now, I suppose we borrowed the term from Hinduism, but by the term a sacred cow, we mean something is too special, too important, too holy to touch. We should never change it. We should never challenge it or doubt it. That's what we mean by the term the sacred cow. I wonder what some of our sacred cows might be. Singing in church, paid clergymen, morning tea. If you'll forgive my mixed metaphor, our passage in Mark's Gospel today shows Jesus doing much, much more than doubting or challenging the biggest sacred cow in Old Testament religion. Instead of challenging it, he condemns the sacred cow, pronounces it dead, and prepares for its destruction. Jesus is talking about the temple of Jerusalem. Our passage today comes in 4 scenes, and I'm going to rely on Rob Cartwright to just do the magic for me because this is not connecting. Scene number 1, Jesus arrives at the temple. Scene number 2, the fig tree, part 1. Yeah, there we go. All right. Scene number 3 is Jesus actually in the temple. And then scene number 4 is the fig tree, part 2. There we go. And what we're going to do, we're going to step through each of these scenes quite quickly. And as we do, we're going to find that they all work together to form one cohesive message. And it's a message that we'll find very challenging for us today as well. And so the first scene begins with Jesus' arrival in Jerusalem. And the interesting thing here, I think, in Mark 11 is that, do you notice that Jesus deliberately stage manages his arrival? He stage manages his arrival at the Jerusalem temple to deliberately evoke the prophecy of Zechariah chapter 9. And so in those first 7 verses, Jesus plans his entry, and he's going to arrive at the temple just as the way the prophet had planned it. So Zechariah 9, "Rejoice greatly, daughter of Zion, shout, daughter Jerusalem, see, your king comes righteous and victorious, lowly and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. I will take away the chariots from Ephraim and the war horses from Jerusalem. The battle bow will be broken. He will proclaim peace to the nations. His rule will extend from sea to sea and from the river to the ends of the earth." And so that's how Jesus arrives on the donkey. And as he does, of course, the crowd, without really knowing, or perhaps they did know, the significance of the song that they were singing Psalm 118. And that's a royal psalm describing God's anointed king arriving at the temple. Now, the song, perhaps it was sung as part of an annual ceremony in preparation for the Passover. That's what some scholars think. But the story of Psalm 118 is God's anointed king approaches the temple and he is welcomed. All the people are waiting for him inside the temple and they welcome him as he arrives. And so the king says in Psalm 118, "Open for me the gates of the righteous," into the temple. "I will enter and give thanks to the Lord. This is the gate of the Lord, through which the righteous may enter. I will give thanks, for you answered me. You have become my salvation. The stone the builders have rejected has become the cornerstone. The Lord has done this, and it's marvellous in our eyes." And now there's a sort of like a scene change, and now this is what the people sing from inside the temple. So the crowd respond, This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Lord, save us. And that is Hosanna. Hosanna is the Hebrew there. Lord, grant us success. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. From the house of the Lord, we bless you. So that's how the song goes. And so this Palm Sunday event of Jesus riding the donkey is all about God's Messiah King arriving at the temple. Not merely Jerusalem, but at the temple. And Jesus carefully planned the event to be exactly that. You might remember that Mark's gospel began with a quote from Isaiah 40 saying, "In the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord. The glory of the Lord will be revealed and all the people will see it together." Here is God's Messiah coming not to the wilderness, but from out of the wilderness, and he's arriving at the temple where he would be welcomed and celebrated as king. Except Jesus wasn't. Verse 11 records this incredible anticlimax, a great disappointment. Jesus entered Jerusalem, went into the temple courts. He looked around at everything, but since it was already late, he went out to Bethany with the 12. Jesus, God's Messiah King, arrives at the temple and nothing happens. There is no royal reception, no acknowledgement. So Jesus turns around and he goes back to camp outside the city at Bethany, just past the Mount of Olives. And that's scene 1. Scene 2 happens the next morning. Jesus and the 12 walk from Bethany back to the temple. Verse 12, the next day as they were leaving Bethany, Jesus was hungry. Seeing in the distance a fig tree in leaf, he went to find out if it had any fruit. When he reached it, he found nothing but leaves, because it was not the season for figs. Then he said to the tree, "May no one ever eat fruit from you again." And his disciples heard him say it. Now what's going on here? Is Jesus so hungry, so hangry, that he explodes in rage at the out-of-season fig tree? No, and that fig tree didn't do anything wrong. Jesus is doing some prophetic drama. This is an enacted parable. It's not really about that fig tree. The fig tree is a symbol, and it represents Israel. Earlier, we read a startling passage from the prophet Hosea. It was a prophecy of judgment. But in it, God says, when he first married Israel, she was so sweet. When I found Israel, it was like finding grapes in the desert. When I saw your ancestors, it was like seeing the early fruit on the fig tree. But Israel was unfaithful to God. But when they came to Baal Peor, they consecrated themselves to that shameful idol and became as vile as the thing they loved. Instead of being faithful to God, Israel had instead married themselves to Baal Peor, another god in the form of an idol. So Israel were no longer like the early fruit on the fig tree, sweet and lush. Mark's Gospel, that's scene 2, but Mark's Gospel doesn't explain the scene yet in the style of Mark's Gospel. All we know is that Jesus has cursed the fig tree on his way to scene 3 in the temple. Same day as the fig tree is cursed. So by now, though, there's plenty of action at the temple. Verse 15, on reaching Jerusalem, Jesus entered the temple courts and began driving out those who were buying and selling there. He overturned the tables of the money changers and the benches of those selling doves, and would not allow anyone to carry merchandise through the temple courts. And as he taught them, he said, "Is it not written, 'My house will be called a house of prayer for all nations'? But you have made it a den of robbers." You might remember, it's the week before Passover. Big crowds are already gathering from far and wide for the biggest religious festival of the year. And the outer courts of the temple, the court of the Gentiles, that was the place where all worshippers were allowed. And it had become crowded now with commercial activity. Money changers were there, and they converted your Greek or Roman money into the temple shekel. So you could take your temple shekel and you could buy doves and sheep for sacrifice for the Passover. And I think it might have been a tidy little earner for the temple treasury because, whenever there's a money changer, right, there's taxes and exchange rates and fees and charges and terms and conditions. And maybe the money changers had to pay a license fee to the priests. And then, of course, you've got to buy the dove or the sheep. Have you ever bought seafood just before Christmas in Australia? There's no bargains, are there? The temple court is a busy scene of bustling commerce. But Jesus would have none of this. I think he got angry as he threw that marketplace into an uproar. This was supposed to be a place of prayer for everyone. But instead, God's temple had become a scam exercise in money-making. Just as a quick aside, if Jesus got angry, if that's what we're seeing here, do you know that anger is not a sin? Actually, no emotion is a sin. It's what we do with our emotions that matters. The Apostle Paul writes, "In your anger, do not sin." So how we feel is never an excuse for sin. Instead, we bring our emotions to God, and perhaps they might even motivate us to take godly action. In Jesus' situation, I think not getting angry would be something to worry about, don't you? Given what he's seen. So let's think about what's happening in the temple that day. Some people say Jesus was cleansing the temple. Some Bible translations even include that as a little sort of a subheading there for you to see. But Jesus is not cleaning up the joint. He's not draining the swamp. He's exposing its corruption. It was all a big sham, so far from anything God ever intended. Ultimately, Jesus is condemning the temple system. Not just the building, but the system of priests and festivals and sacrifice and worship. Their pretended obedience to the law was futile and vain and fruitless. Rather than being ready to welcome her Messiah when he came humbly riding on a donkey, Jesus saw Israel had become hopelessly corrupt, just as the prophets had said. Interesting footnote. Do you notice the reaction of the priests in verse 18 there? The chief priests and the teachers of the law heard this and began looking for a way to kill him, for they feared him, because the whole crowd was amazed at his teaching. Notice the leaders and rulers of the temple do not try to stop Jesus from disrupting the marketplace. They knew they had no excuse for the scandal that it had become. It had happened on their watch. They were responsible. So instead of publicly opposing Jesus, the scene closes with the priest privately plotting to kill him instead. That's the end of that scene. Now, the final scene in our passage returns to the fig tree. It's the next day. In the morning, as they went along, they saw the fig tree withered from the roots. Peter remembered and said, "Jesus, Rabbi, look, the fig tree you cursed has withered." And so the symbol representing Israel was already dead, and it had withered from the roots. Notice also in the fig tree narrative that it bookends the temple story. Fig tree part 1 Temple in the middle, fig tree part 2. The scandal of Israel's worship is framed by the curse of the fig trees. What does that mean? It seems that Jesus is utterly rejecting the Jerusalem temple and its religious system. Jesus did not come to reform the religious life of the Jewish people. He came to replace it. The cursing of the fig tree is a prophetic act, and by it he condemns the temple system, which was fruitless and it was dead. And as 21st century Christians, we give a lot of attention to the unity of the whole Bible and the continuity of God's purpose, including its forms and types and symbols that give expression to God's salvation purpose. The triune God of the New Testament is the same God in the Old Testament, and this continuity is true and very important. But Jesus here shows us that there is discontinuity as well. In particular, the temple system of festivals and sacrifices and priests and the building itself was at an end, a dead end. In their place, Jesus was the dwelling place of God on earth, the temple. First with his own body, and then with the Holy Spirit-filled people who would believe in him. So as Jesus says in John chapter 2, recounting a similar event, or perhaps the same event, "Destroy this temple, and I will raise it again in 3 days." The temple he'd spoken of was his body. The Apostle Paul explains, "Don't you know that you yourselves are the temple, and that God's Spirit dwells in your midst?" When we come to Mark chapter 13 in a couple of weeks, we'll have a little bit more to say about the Jerusalem temple, but for now we can conclude that the temple system and all that it means is cursed by Jesus. It is fruitless, and that's the significance of the fig tree either side of Jesus' action in the temple. It's a lot to take in, isn't it? What now, though? I mean, that's the obvious question that the disciples of Jesus must have. I think they're shocked. If not through the temple and the system of sacrifices and priests, how can Israel be saved? It's a compelling question. The temple system is fruitless, so no salvation will come from it. How then can we be saved? That's the burning question, which explains why Jesus says what he does now in verses 22 and following. He says, "Have faith in God. Truly I tell you, if anyone says to this mountain, 'Go, throw yourself into the sea,' and does not doubt in their heart, but believes that what they say will happen, it will be done for them. Therefore I tell you, whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you've received it and it will be yours." Instead of looking to the temple system of sacrifices and priests and obedience to the law and showing up for the festival, instead, faith in God is the answer. Not blind faith, but faith in God. Trusting him for his salvation purposes and promises. Trusting in him for his faithfulness. But what's the thing with the mountain being thrown into the sea? Won't surprise you that lots of people have got different views. Smart people. 3 main possibilities. What does it mean? Option 1, maybe Jesus is just using a colourful turn of phrase, hyperbole. If you trust in God in prayer, everything is possible for your salvation. Could be that. Option 2, maybe this mountain to which Jesus refers is the Mount of Olives upon which they are standing at that time. And if that's the case, well, Jesus is referring to another prophecy from Zechariah 14:4, where on the last day, the Mount of Olives will be split in two, falling into the Dead Sea, a sign of judgment on the last day. Option 3, if Jesus is looking over to the Temple Mount from the Temple of Olives, and he's referring to the Temple Mount, and that's what he's referring to here, then throwing that mountain into the sea would be judgment on the temple right now, in those days. And it would mean its replacement with something better. So, as I say, there are godly and smart scholars who make the case for each of those options. What do I think? I think the immediate context of the fig tree, temple fig tree condemnation means that this call to prayer is a call for the disciples to pray in faith that God would work salvation apart from the temple. Maybe that's a combination of options 1 and 3, and maybe I should write a book. In short, Jesus' followers should put their faith in God to bring salvation, apart from the temple laws, apart from the sacrifices and priests and festivals. They should take heart and trust God as they pray for salvation. God himself will save his people, and he's going to do it very soon. Now, of course, as Jesus' followers pray for their salvation, they should look to their own standing first with God. Verse 25, and when you stand praying, if you hold anything against anyone, forgive them, so that your Father in heaven may forgive you your sins. So as we stand before God seeking salvation, we recognise our own sins. And so we also extend grace to others in the same way as we depend upon God's grace towards us. Forgiving others, it's not a work that earns God's grace toward us. No, a genuine understanding of our own need of grace causes us at the very same time to forgive others. Both of those come together. So where have we come in Mark 11? It's been a tough grind, hasn't it? Where have we come in Mark 11 today? First of all, we see that Jesus condemns the corrupted temple and its system. It's not the vehicle nor the location of God's salvation. Instead, believers should turn to God in faithful prayer, and they should trust him to provide salvation directly through his Messiah King. God will provide salvation through his Messiah King. And in the same way, we should rely solely upon Jesus Christ for our salvation. Not our worship, not our membership of St. Swithin's or any other church, not the good things that we do. We bring nothing to God except Jesus Christ and his claim upon us. To be clear, through Jesus Christ's death and resurrection is how we are saved. And so, assured of that great news, would we dare look at our own forms of worship and our own accepted practices? The things that we do just because that's what we do, like selling sheep for shekels and trading prayer for commerce. Would we dare look at us saved only through God's Messiah King? Amen.